Welcome to the video on measuring and selecting your Qmotion shades for your application. Before getting started, you might want to visit www.qmotionshades.com and print out the measurement instructions, customer order form, and order form guide. You can also browse the variety of fabric types, colors, textures, and their shading capabilities while on the website. Once you've selected the fabric type and understand the simple order form, you'll be ready to transfer your measurements into an order. Now let's get started. There's a number of ways you can mount your Qmotion shade. The first application we'll talk about is inside mount. This is often the preferred way to install a shade because it's less obtrusive and a cleaner look. This, as you can see, is where the shade is mounted inside the frame of the window. This is the most common way of installing the Qmotion shade. The second example is called outside mount. This is used when your inset depth is less than 3 inches or your windows are not square. As you can see, the shade is mounted on the outside of the window frame and will cover both the window and a portion of the frame. The choice of which mount to use is usually determined by the window frame style, your personal taste, and/or the window construction. After choosing your mount style, you'll need to determine if you want the shade to roll down the standard way or reverse. A standard shade rolls off the back and is close to the glass. A reverse shade rolls off the front and provides a larger space between the shade and the glass. Reverse roll shades are often used when there is ornamentation or other dimensional elements on the glass or frame. Once your mounting style and roll direction have been determined, you'll need to measure your windows. It's important to specify the dimensions of your shade very carefully, down to the nearest 1/16 of an inch, as your shade will be made custom to your dimensions. This is done so we can deliver the best fit, as well as a shade that is aesthetically pleasing. For an inside mount shade, the most important measurement is the top of your window opening. This is where the shade will be mounted. For an inside mount shade, the top of the window jamb-to-jamb measurement translates into the top window width dimension on your order form. Qmotion shades have industry-leading side gaps, less than 7/16 of an inch. Because of this, it's important for you to measure jamb-to-jamb at the top, middle, and at the bottom to make sure those dimensions are correct. If your measurements are off by more than 1/2 of an inch, you may want to consider an outside mount shade. Also check to see that your window is plumb and square. You can do this with a level or by checking the diagonal measurements. If diagonal measurements are off by more than 1/2 of an inch, you might consider an outside mount shade. On an outside mount shade, it's important for you to decide exactly what you want your shade to cover, as well as determining how much overlap you want on each side and at the bottom. Once you've determined what you want to cover, use that dimension, plus the overlap on the right, plus the overlap on the left, plus 7/8 of an inch, in order to determine the bracket-to-bracket dimension for the outside mount shade. In both an inside mount and an outside mount shade, you'll need to determine the overall shade height. This is from the top of the bracket all the way down to where you want the hem bar to be. For inside mount, measure from the bottom of the header to the top of the sill in at least 2 places. Make sure the sill and header are not bowed. This may impede the shade or create an undesirable gap at the top of the shade. For an outside mount application, measure the vertical area to be covered and add 3.25 inches for the shade at the top, plus any overlap desired at the bottom to establish the overall height of the shade. On an inside mount shade, you'll need to enter the top window width, the shade height, and the inside mount depth dimensions on the order form. The inside mount depth is important to determine if your shade will protrude out the inset. This is especially important if you plan to use fascia to cover your shades. For an outside mount shade, you'll need to enter the bracket-to-bracket width and shade height only. On outside mount, be careful to plan for how the shade will deploy. Standard roller shades may need to be shimmed out at the top in order to avoid hitting trim of the window on outside mount applications. Often it's difficult to use metal carpenter tapes in order to get accurate dimensions, especially in the corners. As you can see, when the ruler is bent, it is difficult to precisely get a reading. Here's a better way to measure. Place a small mark or piece of tape on the glass. Now measure both sides up to the tape and add them together. Alternatively, some tape measures have printed the adder on the body of the tape measure. You could also use a laser measuring tool. In using any of these methods, it is important to be as accurate as possible. Please note, if the depth of the window is less than 3 inches on an inside mount, the shade will extend past the inside of the frame. Take your time in making your measurements. Get them as accurate as possible, down to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. The final result will be well worth the effort. Also be sure to check each and every window opening you plan on installing Qmotion. Often windows appear to be the same size, but window framing may vary from opening to opening. Older homes have been known to settle over time and can affect the size and shape of the window openings. Take time to record the description and location of each of your measurements on your order form. For applications larger than 8 feet wide and 10 feet tall, consult our website at www.qmotionshades.com. Okay, we're almost complete. So far, you've selected the windows you wish to shade, selected a fabric type, determined if you want inside or outside mount, measured the depth of the window and other key dimensions, and determined if you want standard or reverse roll direction. Before moving on, determine how many remotes you want to have and which shades they will control. You'll want to create zones of the window shades that are controlled by the same remote. There is no limit to how many shades one remote can control. For example, you may want all the shades on the south side of your living room to be controlled by the same remote. Be sure to mark down on the order form the zone for each window. You'll receive one remote for each zone. If needed, you can order extra remotes and they can be programmed on site. The last consideration on your order form is if you desire a fascia with your Qmotion roller shade. Fascias, which come painted to match the hem bar or fabric wrapped to match the Qmotion roller shade fabric type, can be ordered for inside or outside mount applications. You can visit www.qmotionshades.com and look at the product guide to see which fascia is available for which application. Fascias, or window treatments, are custom manufactured to fit your shades. But all treatments are not interchangeable. Make sure you've committed to a treatment, as it will be made custom to fit your shade. If you have any questions, contact our customer service at www.qmotionshades.com. There are a number of choices including standard and pivoting fascias, soft balances, all available in a variety of colors and textures. Decide what's right for your application and personal preference. The type of window treatments and choice of fabric will need to be entered onto the order form. Shades are available in a wide variety of colors, materials, and level of light transparency. The level of light transparency can range from blackout, or very little light, to a lighter transparency that allows the view to be enjoyed. Our website, www.qmotionshades.com, has all of the options for you to select and choose from. Once you've gathered all your dimensions and made all your window treatment decisions, you'll enter all this information on your order form.